I never expected my life to unravel on what should have been the most romantic moment of my existence. But there I stood on the edge of Sunset Cliff, with my boyfriend Nate down on one knee, holding up a ring that caught the dying sunlight like a warning flare. My name is Maddie, and I should have listened to that warning. Madison Carter, Nate said, his voice trembling slightly. Will you marry me? The ocean waves crashed below us, and a gust of wind whipped my hair across my face. I brushed it away, trying to focus on the man I loved, but something felt off. The timing, the location, none of it made sense. We had plans to discuss our future next month, after I finished my big project at work. Nate knew how much I valued careful planning. Yes, I heard myself say, even as my stomach twisted into knots. Of course, yes. Nate's face lit up as he slipped the ring onto my finger. It was beautiful, vintage style with intricate details, exactly the kind of ring his mother Maggie would choose. That should have been my second warning. I couldn't wait any longer, Nate said, pulling me into an embrace. Mom helped me pick out the ring last week. She's going to be so excited. Of course she would be. Maggie Thompson had been dropping hints about marriage since our third date. I forced a smile, trying to push away the realization that Nate had planned this life-changing moment with his mother, instead of considering what I might want. Did you tell your mom before you proposed? I asked, keeping my tone light. Nate's slight hesitation told me everything. Well, you know how she is. She wanted to be involved, and honestly, she had some great ideas about the proposal. She even suggested this spot. The sunset suddenly felt less romantic and more like nature's countdown timer. I glanced at my phone. 3 missed calls from Maggie already. My engagement wasn't even an hour old, and she was already asserting control. We should head back, Nate said, checking his own phone. Mom's arranged a surprise celebration dinner at La Maison. La Maison, Maggie's favorite restaurant, where she knew all the staff by name and always got the best table. Not the casual pizza place where Nate and I had our first date, or the cozy cafe where we spent Sunday mornings planning our future. Actually, I said, I thought maybe we could celebrate just the 2 of us first. Maybe grab a drink at Murphy's. Nate's face fell slightly. Mom's already made the reservations. Everyone's waiting for us. Everyone. Which meant Maggie had already assembled her entire social circle to witness her triumph. I could picture it perfectly. Her holding court at the head of the table, showing off her future daughter-in-law like a prize poodle at a dog show. Right, I said, forcing another smile. Of course. As we walked back to the car, Nate chatted excitedly about the future. But all I could think about was how quickly my carefully ordered world was spinning out of control. I'm a financial analyst. I plan things. I calculate risks. I create spreadsheets for grocery shopping, for heaven's sake. Yet here I was, being swept along in Maggie Thompson's grand plan for her only son's perfect wedding. My phone buzzed again, Maggie, of course. But there was also a text from my best friend Sarah. Did it happen? Are you okay? Call me ASAP. I typed back quickly, engaged. Tell you everything later. Sarah's response was immediate. Congratulations? Question mark intended. Wine tomorrow. I smiled at my phone, feeling a little steadier. At least someone understood my complicated feelings about this moment. As we pulled into La Maison's parking lot, I could see Maggie's elegant figure waiting at the entrance, practically vibrating with excitement. She was already waving, already moving forward to claim her role in our story. I touched the ring on my finger, wondering if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life, or if I was simply being paranoid about my future mother-in-law's enthusiasm. I was about to find out exactly how wrong I was on both counts. The bridal boutique's lighting was harsh, making everything look too bright, too real. I sat in the bride's throne, a ridiculous velvet chair Maggie had insisted was traditional, watching my simple wedding dreams dissolve into a cloud of tulle and expectations. Darling, you simply must try the Valentina gown, Maggie called out, her voice carrying that silk-wrapped steel tone I was growing to dread. It's absolutely perfect for a Thompson wedding. I caught Sarah's eye across the room. My best friend gave me a subtle eye roll that made me want to laugh and cry simultaneously. We'd spent weeks creating my wedding Pinterest board. Clean lines, minimal fuss, elegant simplicity. Everything the Valentina gown, with its cathedral train and enough beating to sink a small ship, wasn't. I was thinking something more understated, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Maybe the Jenny we saw online? Maggie's laugh tinkled like breaking glass. Oh, sweetie, that's lovely for a backyard wedding, but we're having 300 guests at the Grand Plaza. You need something that makes a statement. 300 guests. My stomach lurched. I thought Nate and I agreed on a smaller wedding? Maybe 150 max. Nathaniel understands the importance of family obligations, Maggie said, expertly flicking through another rack of gowns. The Thompsons have connections throughout the city. We can't possibly exclude anyone. I pulled out my phone, typing quickly to Nate. We need to talk about the guest list. Your mom's talking 300 people now. His response came quickly, whatever makes you both happy, smiling face with smiling eyes. My fingers tightened around the phone. Whatever makes you both happy. As if my happiness and his mother's were somehow equivalent. As if he couldn't see the growing chasm between those two concepts. Here, Maggie announced triumphantly, holding up what appeared to be the love child of a wedding dress and a Christmas tree. This is absolutely perfect. Sarah stepped forward, finally breaking her diplomatic silence. Maybe we should take a break? Get some lunch, clear our heads. Nonsense, Maggie said. We have appointments at 3 more boutiques today. The perfect dress won't wait, and we only have 8 months until the wedding. 8 months that suddenly felt like a countdown to my own execution. I stood up, my legs shaky. I need some air. Outside, the spring breeze felt like salvation. Sarah followed me, pulling a pack of cigarettes from her purse, a habit she'd supposedly quit years ago. Want one? She asked, lighting up. I shook my head, then changed my mind. Actually, yes. We stood in silence, watching the smoke drift away. Finally, Sarah spoke. You know you can say no, right? To any of this. To all of this. Can I? I laughed, but it came out hollow. You should see the spreadsheet Maggie made. Every minute of the next 8 months is planned. She's already put deposits down on half the vendors. With whose money? Sarah's question hit like a punch to the gut. I don't know, I realized. I should know that, shouldn't I? I'm a financial analyst, for God's sake. The boutique door chimed. Maggie emerged, her face a perfect mask of concern. Girls, we're going to be late for our next appointment. Madison, darling, I've pulled some options I think you'll love. As we followed her to her Mercedes, my phone buzzed again. A text from Nate. Mom says you're being difficult about the dress. Please try to work with her. She knows what she's doing. I stopped walking, staring at the message. Sarah bumped into me, then read over my shoulder. Oh hell no, she muttered. I looked up at Maggie's retreating back, then at my engagement ring, the ring she'd chosen. For the first time, I noticed how heavy it felt on my finger, like a beautifully decorated handcuff. Coming, dear, Maggie called, already sliding into the driver's seat. I took a deep breath, tasting the last of the cigarette's rebellion on my tongue. Yes, I said, but in my mind, I was already calculating something else entirely, the cost of saying no, and whether I could afford to pay it. The morning of my wedding day, I stared at my reflection in the bridal suite mirror, barely recognizing myself beneath the elaborate updo and heavy makeup Maggie had insisted upon. The Valentina gown she'd chosen felt like armor, beautiful, suffocating armor that cost more than my first car. 5 minutes until the ceremony. Maggie's voice rang through the door. Everyone in position. Sarah caught my eye in the mirror. You okay? You look a little green. I wasn't okay. The guest list had somehow swelled to 350 people, most of whom I'd never met. The simple string quartet I'd wanted had been replaced by a 20-piece orchestra. Even my father's traditional father-daughter dance song had been vetoed in favor of something more sophisticated. I need a minute, I said, heading for the attached bathroom. Just stall if you need to. Inside, I gripped the marble countertop, trying to steady my breathing. My phone buzzed, a text from Nate. Can't wait to see you. Mom says you'll look perfect. Of course she did. She'd orchestrated every detail, down to the shade of nail polish on my fingers. I looked down at my hands and noticed something that made my stomach lurch. My grandmother's simple gold bracelet, the one I'd planned to wear, was missing. I rushed back into the suite. Has anyone seen my bracelet? The one from Gran. Oh, I removed it earlier, Maggie said, sweeping in with a velvet box. It didn't quite match the aesthetic. But look what Nathaniel and I picked out instead. Inside was a diamond tennis bracelet that probably cost more than my grandmother's entire jewelry collection. The sight of it made me feel sick. "Where did you put my bracelet?" I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. "It's safe in my purse, dear. We can discuss it after the ceremony. Speaking of which, I want it now." The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Maggie's perfect smile flickered. "Madison, darling, we don't have time for this. The guests are waiting. 350 strangers can wait 5 more minutes." I held out my hand. "The bracelet, please." The room went silent. Sarah moved closer to me, while the other bridesmaids, all Maggie's choices, shifted uncomfortably. "I don't understand why you're being difficult about this," Maggie said. "Everything is perfect. Everything is exactly as it should be." "As it should be for whom?" I asked. "Because none of this, not the dress, not the venue, not even the damn flower arrangements, is what Nate and I planned. Nathaniel understands the importance of maintaining certain standards. Nathaniel understands doing whatever you want to avoid conflict." The words exploded out of me, shocking everyone, including myself. My phone buzzed again. "Nate, where are you?" "Mom's getting worried." That's when it hit me. He hadn't even asked if I was okay. Hadn't checked if I needed anything. His only concern was his mother's anxiety. "Sarah," I said quietly, "could you help me out of this dress?" "Madison." Maggie's voice rose sharply. "Don't you dare. It's still my wedding day." I cut her off, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. And for once, I'm making a decision about it. I turned to Sarah, who was already working on the buttons of the Valentina gown. "Call my dad, please. Tell him to meet me at the side entrance." "You can't do this to Nathaniel," Maggie said, her composure cracking. "Think about his reputation, his position in the community." I stepped out of the dress, standing in my slip while Sarah handed me the jeans and sweater I'd worn to the venue. "I have been thinking. About Nate, about our future, about who's really in control of both." My phone buzzed one final time. "Nate again, Mom's really upset. Please don't ruin this day for her." I slipped my grandmother's bracelet off Maggie's wrist while she stood there, too shocked to resist. As I fastened it around my own wrist, I felt its familiar weight, not like a handcuff at all, but like an anchor to who I really was. "Tell Nate," I said, heading for the door, "that his mother's day isn't ruined. She can keep everything, the venue, the orchestra, even the 300 guests. She just can't keep me." 3 weeks after walking out of my own wedding, I came home to find Maggie reorganizing my kitchen. She stood in the middle of my apartment, surrounded by open cabinets and displaced appliances, while Nate hovered nearby with a box of his mother's essential cooking tools. "The renovation company found asbestos," Nate said quickly before I could speak. "Mom needs to stay with us for a few weeks." I set my laptop bag down carefully, noting how they'd already pushed my carefully curated furniture around to accommodate Maggie's antique armchair, the one that now occupied my reading nook. "A few weeks," I repeated, watching Maggie replace my organized spice rack with her own crystal jars. "And you didn't think to discuss this with me first?" "Darling, it was an emergency," Maggie said, not looking up from her task. "And really, this kitchen needed a proper woman's touch. These modern organizing systems lack soul." My fingers twitched. That modern organizing system had taken me a full weekend to perfect. "Nate, can we talk?" Privately, in our bedroom, the only space still untouched by Hurricane Maggie, Nate immediately went on the defensive. I couldn't just leave her without a place to stay. "She's my mother." "That's not the point," I said, keeping my voice low. "We're supposed to be working on our communication, remember? That's why we postponed the wedding instead of canceling it." "I know, but..." A crash from the kitchen cut him off. We both rushed out to find my grandmother's ceramic cookie jar in pieces on the floor. "Oh dear," Maggie said, looking more annoyed than apologetic. "These shelves are so impractically arranged. But don't worry, I brought my Royal Doulton set to replace it." I stared at the shattered pieces, the last gift my grandmother had given me before she died. Nate touched my arm. "It was an accident, Maddie. Mom didn't mean." "Stop making excuses for her," I snapped, pulling away. "Just once. I'd like you to acknowledge when she crosses a line." "Madison." Maggie's voice took on that familiar steel edge. "I understand you're upset, but this hostility isn't helpful. We're family now, And families support each other through difficult times. Family, I laughed. The sound harsh even to my own ears. Family doesn't bulldoze boundaries. Family asks permission before moving in. Family respects. My phone buzzed, a notification from my banking app. I opened it, then froze. Nate, why is there a $5,000 withdrawal from our joint account? The guilty look that passed between mother and son made my blood run cold. Mom needed help with the contractor's deposit, Nate mumbled. I was going to tell you. When? I demanded. After she redecorated our entire apartment? After she replaced everything I own with things she deems appropriate. Now you're just being dramatic, Maggie said, already unpacking another box of her belongings. Nathaniel understands the importance of family obligations. Perhaps if your own mother had been around longer. Get out. The words came out quiet but firm. Excuse me. Maggie's eyebrows shot up. Both of you. Get out. I moved to the door, opening it wide. Take your Royal Doulton and your family obligations and get out of my apartment. Maddie, please. Nate started, but I cut him off. You can stay at your mother's house, the one that mysteriously needs renovations despite looking perfect when we had dinner there last week. Maggie's face flushed. Nate's eyes widened as the implication hit him. You planned this, I said, the realization settling like ice in my stomach. The asbestos, the emergency, all of it. Another attempt to control our lives. Madison, Maggie began, but I held up my hand. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the joint account tomorrow, I said, my analyst's brain already calculating the next steps. For now, please leave before I call building security. As they gathered their things, Maggie protesting, Nate pleading, I stood by the door, my grandmother's broken cookie jar at my feet. Each piece felt like a fragment of the future I'd thought I wanted, shattered by the weight of expectations and control I'd never asked for. But this time, I wouldn't let anyone else pick up the pieces and rearrange them to their liking. This time, I'd decide what to salvage and what to leave broken. The bank statement spread across my dining table told a story that made my stomach churn. Over the past 3 months, nearly $30,000 had quietly disappeared from our joint account through small, recurring transfers. Each one labeled innocuously home improvement, family investment, emergency fund. I was supposed to be the financial analyst. How had I missed this? My phone buzzed, Nate's 5th call today. I let it go to voicemail, focusing instead on highlighting another suspicious transaction. The front door clicked open, and I heard his familiar footsteps. Maddie? Can we talk? Nate's voice carried that pleading tone I'd grown to hate. Mom's really upset about yesterday, and I think if we all just sit down. Interesting choice of words, I said, not looking up. Sitting down. That's what I've been doing for the last 4 hours, looking at our bank statements. The silence that followed was deafening. I can explain, he started. These transfers, I cut him off, finally meeting his eyes. They started the day after I walked out of the wedding. Every week, like clockwork. Did you think I wouldn't notice? He shifted uncomfortably. Mom needed help with her mortgage. After Dad died, things got complicated. Your father died 3 years ago, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. And your mother's house is paid off. I did the paperwork myself, remember? Nate's face flushed. She's investing in a new business venture. Something to keep her occupied. Stop lying. I stood up, pushing the statements toward him. I called the account numbers. They all lead to a private investment portfolio in her name. One that's been actively trading with our money. Our money, he repeated, a hint of defiance creeping into his voice. Exactly. We're supposed to be partners, Maddie. Family helps family. Partners communicate, I shot back. Partners don't steal from each other. It's not stealing when we share everything. His voice rose. You're so obsessed with control, with your spreadsheets and budgets. Maybe if you'd been more flexible about the wedding. The wedding I paid for? I laughed bitterly. The one your mother turned into her personal showcase while you stood by and watched. My phone buzzed again. Maggie's number this time. I picked it up and declined the call, then noticed a new email notification. From my bank. Another transfer just went through, I said, opening the alert. $10,000. 10 minutes ago. Nate's expression shifted from defensive to panicked. Mom said she needed it for. For what? I stepped closer, showing him the screen. What could possibly justify emptying our account without even asking me? He wouldn't meet my eyes. She said it was insurance. In case you tried to leave again. The words hit me like a physical blow. Insurance, I repeated. Against me leaving. So you gave her our savings. She's trying to protect us. Nate's voice cracked. She knows what's best. Get out. The words came out barely above a whisper. Maddie, please. Get out. I slammed my hand on the table, making the papers jump. Take your protection and your lies and get out. I'm done. He stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You don't mean that. We can work this out. Mom says. Your mother, I cut in, my voice deadly calm, has been manipulating both of us from the start. And you let her. But here's what's going to happen now. I'm calling my lawyer. I'm freezing all our joint accounts. And I'm filing charges for financial fraud. You wouldn't, he whispered. It would destroy Mom's reputation. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw for the first time how small he seemed without his mother's shadow to hide in. You're right, I said, gathering the statements into a folder. I wouldn't destroy her reputation. I'm going to let her do that herself. Every transaction, every manipulation, every lie, it's all here in black and white. And numbers don't lie, Nate. Even when people do. As he finally turned to leave, I felt something shift inside me. The hurt was still there, but now it had company. A cold, calculated determination that felt surprisingly like freedom. The cease and desist letter from Maggie's lawyer arrived the same morning my boss called me into his office. I knew something was wrong when I saw the Thompson Financial Group logo on his computer screen. Madison, he said, not quite meeting my eyes, we need to discuss a potential conflict of interest. My stomach dropped. Maggie's company was one of our firm's biggest clients. Of course, she'd find a way to hit me where it hurt most. Charles Thompson called personally. My boss continued, shuffling papers on his desk. He's concerned about sensitive financial information, given your personal situation with his sister-in-law. I've never handled their accounts, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. I made sure of that when Nate and I got engaged. It's not about what you've done. It's about what you might do. He slid a document across the desk. They're requesting your immediate removal from any projects that could potentially intersect with their interests. I scanned the paper, my analyst's brain automatically calculating the impact. Half my current clients had some connection to Thompson Financial. My carefully built career was being dismantled, spreadsheet by spreadsheet. This is retaliation, I said, for the fraud charges I'm filing. Madison, he sighed, finally meeting my eyes. Drop the charges. Take a leave of absence. Let this blow over. My phone buzzed, another text from Nate. Mom's lawyer says they'll drop everything if you just apologize. Please, Maddie. This is getting out of hand. Getting out of hand. Like I was a child throwing a tantrum, not someone whose life savings had been stolen by her future mother-in-law. I need to think about it, I told my boss, standing up on shaky legs. Outside his office, I ran straight into Emily Foster, an old college friend who'd recently joined the firm. She steadied me, then noticed my face. Maddie? What's wrong? Before I could answer, my phone rang. My landlord. Miss Carter? We've received some concerning information about your rental history. I let it go to voicemail, already knowing what I'd hear. Maggie's reach was apparently endless, her revenge methodical and thorough. They're trying to destroy me, I whispered, more to myself than Emily. Who is? Emily asked, pulling me into an empty conference room. I told her everything. The wedding, the stolen money, Maggie's escalating attacks. Emily listened, then pulled out her laptop. Show me the numbers, she said simply. For the next hour, we pieced together the trail of transactions, the pattern of financial manipulation. Emily's eyes widened as she recognized something in the data. This isn't just about you, she said finally. These investment patterns, I've seen them before. In fraud cases I worked on at my old firm. Hope flickered briefly, then died as my phone buzzed with another email. My bank account had been frozen pending investigation. It doesn't matter, I said, closing the laptop. She's won. I can't fight her without money, without a job, without playing by her rules, Emily finished. She hesitated, then pulled out a business card. I have a friend at the SEC. These transactions? They're part of a bigger pattern. One the Securities and Exchange Commission might be very interested in. I stared at the card, remembering Maggie's words from months ago. Family protects family. But family doesn't destroy what it claims to love. My phone buzzed one final time, a text from Sarah. Your dad's here. Says Maggie's people contacted his school board. Come home. Now. The card trembled in my hand as fury replaced fear. Maggie hadn't just attacked me. She'd gone after my father, the one person who'd always supported me unconditionally. Make the call, I told Emily, my voice hard as steel. It's time to show Maggie Thompson what real protection looks like. I'd wanted revenge. But now, looking at the evidence of years of financial manipulation spread across the conference table, I realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice, not just for me, but for everyone Maggie had ever controlled, manipulated, or destroyed. And I was done playing defense. The SEC investigation hit the morning news like a thunderbolt. I watched from my father's living room as Maggie Thompson's carefully constructed world crumbled on live television. Federal agents escorted her from the Thompson financial offices, while reporters shouted questions about years of systematic fraud. My phone lit up with a text from Emily. They found everything. The shell companies, the hidden accounts. It's bigger than we thought. Then came Nate's call. For once, I answered. How could you do this to her? His voice cracked. She's your family. No, I said quietly. She was your excuse. The doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Nate on my father's porch, phone still pressed to his ear. I opened the door but stayed behind the threshold. She's facing federal charges, Maddie. His eyes were red-rimmed, desperate. They're talking about prison time. Real prison. I know. I kept my voice steady. I've seen the numbers, Nate. All of them. Not just what she took from us, but from dozens of other families. Their retirement funds, their savings, their futures. She was trying to protect us. He stepped forward, but I held my ground. Protect us? I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. By stealing our money? By threatening my father's career? By destroying everything and everyone who didn't fit into her perfect plan? You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I pulled out my phone, showing him the spreadsheet Emily and I had compiled. These aren't just numbers, Nate. They're people. Real people your mother convinced to trust her with their life savings, just like she convinced you to trust her with ours. His face crumpled as he scrolled through the data. This can't be right. Mom wouldn't. She did. And you helped her. I took back my phone. Every time you chose her control over our future, every time you let her decide what was best for us, you helped her take a little more. I can fix this, he said, running his hands through his hair. If you drop the charges, tell them it was a misunderstanding. It's too late. I stepped onto the porch, finally facing him at eye level. The SEC has everything. Bank records, witness statements, your mother's own paper trail. She got sloppy, Nate. Too used to getting her way. Then why are you here? He gestured at my father's house. Why aren't you home? Because this is what real family looks like. I pointed through the window where my father sat with Sarah, sorting through job applications. They're helping me rebuild what your mother tried to destroy. No conditions, no control, no perfect plan, just love. I love you, he whispered. Isn't that enough? No. The word came easily now. Because you never loved me more than you feared her. His phone buzzed. Maggie's lawyer, probably. Mine buzzed too, Emily, with updates about the investigation. Two worlds colliding in our pocket-sized devices. She'll lose everything, Nate said, staring at his phone. She already did. I touched his arm gently. The moment she decided control was more important than love. He looked at me then. Really looked at me, perhaps for the first time seeing the woman I'd become instead of the one his mother had tried to shape. I don't know how to fix this, he admitted. That's the point, Nate. Some things can't be fixed. They can only be finished. I stepped back inside, my hand on the door. Goodbye, Nate. I hope you find your own way out of her shadow. As I closed the door, I heard him start to speak. But whatever he said was lost in the sound of my father's wind chimes, the ones my mother had hung years ago, before cancer took her. Their gentle music reminded me that endings weren't always about revenge or justice. Sometimes they were simply about finding the courage to write your own story, even when others tried to control the narrative. Inside, Sarah handed me a cup of coffee and a stack of job listings. My father squeezed my shoulder, and for the first time in months, I felt truly, completely free. 1 year later, I stood at Sunset Cliff again, watching waves crash against rocks that had seen countless promises made and broken. The irony wasn't lost on me, returning to where my story with Nate began, only to find myself more complete without him. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Margaret Thompson sentenced in multi-million-dollar fraud case. I didn't need to read it. Emily had already texted me the details. 8 years, with possibility of parole. Justice served in neat, numerical packages, just the way I liked it. Thought I'd find you here, Sarah's voice carried over the wind. She handed me a coffee and leaned against the railing. Celebrating? I considered the question, watching a seabird dive into the waves below. Not celebrating. Just acknowledging. Nate called the gallery yesterday, she said carefully. Asked if you'd be at the opening. My new collection of financial photography, stark, beautiful images of spreadsheets transformed into abstract art, was debuting next week. A collaboration with Sarah that had started as therapy and evolved into something unexpectedly successful. What did you tell him? That his RSVP was declined. She bumped my shoulder. Some doors need to stay closed. My father's voice echoed in my memory from the night I'd left Nate. Forgiveness isn't about letting people back in. Sometimes it's about letting yourself move forward. A jogger passed us and I recognized Emily, who waved but didn't stop. She'd become a regular part of our lives, her precise analytical mind balancing Sarah's artistic chaos in ways that made our friendship feel complete. The SEC wants me to consult on similar cases, I said, watching Emily disappear around the curve. Apparently, my unique personal insight could help identify other financial predators. Sarah grinned. Look at you, turning revenge into a career opportunity. Not revenge, I corrected. Protection. For people who don't know they need it yet. My phone buzzed again, a text from my new firm, confirming Monday's client meeting. After the Thompson scandal, several boutique financial firms had courted me, impressed by my role in uncovering the fraud. I'd chosen the smallest one, where client relationships were built on trust rather than tradition. You know what's funny? I said, finishing my coffee. Maggie always said I was too controlling, too focused on numbers and plans. But in the end, that's exactly what set me free. Speaking of plans, Sarah pulled an envelope from her bag. Your dad asked me to give you this. Inside was a key and a note in my father's careful handwriting. For when you're ready. Mom would have wanted you to have it. The key to my mother's art studio. The space he'd kept locked since her death, preserving her half-finished paintings and dreams. He'd always said he was waiting for the right moment to open it again. He says you've found your balance, Sarah explained. Between the numbers that keep us safe and the chaos that keeps us growing. A year ago, I would have analyzed this moment, calculated the risks and rewards of accepting such an emotionally charged gift. Now, I simply slipped the key onto my keyring, letting it settle among the others that marked my new life. Want to help me clean it out this weekend? I asked Sarah. Clean it out. She raised an eyebrow. Or set up your new home office? I smiled, remembering how my mother used to say creativity and calculation were just different languages for the same truth. Maybe both. I think there's room for spreadsheets among the easels. As we walked back to our cars, I paused for one last look at the cliff where Nate had proposed. The setting sun painted the ocean in shades of possibility, reminding me that some leaps aren't about falling or flying, they're about finally finding solid ground beneath your feet. Ready? Sarah called. I touched my mother's key, feeling its potential warm against my palm. Yeah, I said, turning away from the cliff. I'm ready, not for an ending, but for whatever came next. After all, the best calculations always leave room for surprise.